In this video help tutorial, we're going to be working with the customer data screen, which is also known as the primary or parent record for this application. When you're using a relational database, you create a master record by adding an add record by clicking on this button. It adds an ID for that record, and everything that is related to this client and the company information that you put into the screen. If you picture it as the first page in a book, if you add data to these popover screens and edit in those, it'll add records based on the primary screen. So what happens is everything that's related to Mr. John Smith, like call management, meetings, and action items, will always come back using this idea to link them to Mr. John Smith. It's very simple. Now in this application you have the approach where you can use a client as an individual, a couple if it's a married couple, a company, business, and if you use the edit button and bring up this screen, you can modify any drop-down list by clicking on it and then putting the information and reordering it the way you want it in the screen. If you're working with the data in each screen, as you click, say if you're on an iOS device, it'll bring up the keyboard and allow you to put in information. Depending upon the application design, as far as if it's an iOS, Mac, Windows, or a cloud app, you would use the keyboard on a desktop type of a computer, and then ISO devices like an iPad or iPhone would use the pop-up keyboard. In this application, we're using the desktop version so that I can show you with a mouse and show you how to navigate using a mouse. I would be entering data with a keyboard in this particular case. The same thing happens on a cloud application, but the cloud is a multi-user application hosted on a server on the cloud. It has all the exact same implementation as far as the usage that I'm showing you now. The iOS devices, like an iPhone and an iPad, are exactly the same as this screen and the other screens that are in the application, with the only difference is that you can use gestures with your fingers to zoom in, zoom out, and do other things to manage the information on the screen. This particular application being on the desktop on a Macintosh looks quite similar to the iOS devices as far as its usage, with the exception though we're using a mouse instead of touching the screen, as I said. Okay, when you start out using this application, we're going to start using things from the application map and go over. As we stated before in the last video, you navigate using these different screens, and you'll see that there's a counterpart on this screen. It's called a popover. And what happens is when I go to the first screen, which is the call management over here, I can go to the portal record for that thing. And then same thing with a meeting and action. If you'll see, there's meeting and action items down at the bottom for a list view and for action items here for clients. What happens is the information that is shown on the portal screens and list views is originated and edited in this screen. So if I go, for example, to call management, it'll pop up a popover screen, and I would create the record for each individual added record. And this is true for all the different screens. These are multi-line, multiple scrollable records, meaning that you can have as many records as you want to add to the database for Mr. Jones, for example, in ID number 1. The same thing goes for meeting management and also for action items. And we're going to be covering those individually as we go through the individual screens that are popovers. As I stated earlier, when you're creating this as the primary or parent record, you would add clicking on an add record button, you would add a new record. And each time you add a new record, it'll sequence by one and create the new blank record that you would go ahead and add data in. And the data that I've added in this screen right now is for an example only. You would overwrite this information by changing the screen information that's been added in here. As you create a brand new record, it's going to add the record date automatically for you. You will not have to put that in. You can modify it if you have to. You can click into it and then edit that date so that it will bring up the information for that particular field. Now, the client name, you add that by typing it in. Same thing, the individual drop-down menus as we just showed you, and fill out the rest of the information. Now, because you can have a couple, in this case, like a married couple that are getting services or whatever you're providing using your CRM application, you would be able to add additional information in the general comments down here as far as the spouse and whatever direction you're going, the husband or wife, and put that spousal information down here. You can have also one company, which is a entire company represented by one person, and the company information over here would tell us about that company. And with a company, this is the primary contact. You can add additional information for additional people that can be contacted if you need to in this space down here. And you can add their contact information as far as their phone number and their email. Now, in this particular thing, there's additional, if it's company, you have the ability to put quite a bit of information in here as far as the primary contact, their cell phone and their client phone, office phone, the department they work in, or the office they work in, 1 or 2 emails, a second contact, the second contact's phone and email. So you have the ability to manage more information as far as the contacts within the company. As we go through here, you'll see that there's a log out button. What happens is if you're on an iOS device or on the browser on the cloud, you need to log out in order to get off the application and get out of it. You would go ahead and do that by clicking on the log out button. It would close the application down. If you're on the desktop, either on a Mac or a PC, that's not necessary because in the applications over here you have the ability to close by clicking on the close button. Down here at the bottom of the screen you have a video help button. This takes you to all the videos that are included with this application. So that by clicking on this, it will allow you to go ahead and find the video helps that you're looking at right now. Now, one of the things I want to point out is this up here, which is called Do Action button. The Do Action button is highlighted so you don't click on it as the new record, so you can identify it very readily. If you click on this, what it does is it gives you actions that you can do. You can select an action. In the case of a find and perform find, when you click on the screen, and for example, if I start a find, it's going to rotate. If it's on an iOS device, it will rotate the screen and then show you the little magnifying glass. What you would do is you would add some information or multiple pieces of information to narrow the search. It can be anywhere as far as the customer is concerned. You can even go to the general comments and look in there and any of these company information things. If you're in a portal, which I'm going to show you later, you cannot search in a portal, but you can use the drop-down list to go to the individual list views, and you can search within the list views, or you can go to the actual portal records like this one and the list views in order to do a find within those areas. So for example, let's use this as an example, and I'll type in John for the one record we're reviewing, and if I say do the find or perform the find in this case, it finds John's information. It's very quick. It takes less than a second usually to open and find that piece of information. Now let me point out, if there were more than one John, like John Redding or John Smith or John Wright, it would find all the Johns and those. So if you're going to look for somebody specifically, you would put in John Smith, and then John Smith's record would come up. For any additional people that are shown with a John Smith, or say you have multiple John Smiths, it would be very important to put something that would separate this record from the other ones. For example, put an initial, John M. Smith, for example. That would help you to find that person and differentiate between 2 John Smiths. The same thing goes if you're looking for something more broadly. Say, for example, I want to find client type, all individual clients. I could use the drop down, I could use individual, and that would find all the records that are individuals. So that would be one person as an individual. Or I can put in an address or a city just to find everybody within one city or everybody within one zip code. I can find, for example, the state over here for the companies or the company name. So it's pretty obvious there are several ways to find different information as far as the organizations and stuff. If I have several people within one company that are in different departments that have their own separate records because you do business with each individual department, looking for the department would be a good way to find those individuals. For example, if I was an engineer and I was in the engineering department, then every engineer that I would go to look for, I would go and select engineer if it was spelled out in this field. So those are the kind of searches you can do. You can also do date searches where you're looking for specific records within a date or date range. And we'll talk about date ranges in a little bit. This little field drop down up here is probably what you already figured out. This is an active client or an inactive client. If you have inactive clients, they're basically something you probably don't want to delete the records because it has all kinds of data within the application. In fact, this application really is not designed for where you would delete inactive clients, because you can always come back to an inactive client if you needed to research information. It's probably not even a good idea to delete any information for any client, especially if you're going to be doing more contracts with them later on, or doing business where you are signing them up for something like a contract type of a situation. So that is in essence what this screen is used for. In the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be explaining the call management system, the meeting management, and action screens. Let's go ahead now and we'll quit and then come back for the call management screen. Thank you.